Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm back with another update about my CGC Experiment. As you know, just earlier this week, I got in 6 books from CGC, 6 copies of Star Slayer #2. I did a whole video about how CGC actually didn't screw anything up, and I got lucky and I got a couple 9.8s. So I was like, well, I guess that worked out. But I spoke too soon. Yes, I spoke too soon because it turns out CGC did royally screw up this order just in a way that took me a little while to figure out. So that's what this video is going to be about. Before I jump into that, I did want to just real quick mention my newest comic, Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam #2 is coming out on Kickstarter next week. It's going to be live Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to be doing a live stream here on the channel. So I've got the links down below. You can click on the link to see the pre-launch page. Click the notify me on launch button if you want to make sure you don't miss any of the limited edition variant covers for that. And join me on the live stream from 8 to 9 Eastern next Wednesday. It's Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam #2. So really excited for that. But now that plug is out of the way, let's talk about these CGC books. So, as I went over in the first video, I sent in 6 copies. I got 6 back. I was not expecting any 9.8s, but I did in fact get 2. I got 2 9.8s, and 2 9.6s, and a 9.4, and a 9.2. So I was pretty happy, and I was like, well, I guess that worked out. But the one thing that I was confused about was, part of one of the things I was testing was their in-house grading service, CCS. And what you do is you send it in, and you're like, basically when they check in the books, before they grade them, they send them to CCS if you pay $15 per book, and they press them. And I've never had anything pressed before, and I've heard mixed things about pressing, but also just mixed things about CCS. And so I wanted to see how it was going to go, because before I sent them in, I didn't think any of them were going to be 9.8s, but some of them had some pressable defects that could be pressed out, so I sent them over there. And when I got the books back again, I was very happy with the results, but then I looked at the grader's notes. Now in the last video I hadn't looked at the notes yet, and I said I was going to look at them, and I just added them to the video notes. But after I recorded that, I looked at the grader's notes, and I was really puzzled, because there were 3 books of grader's notes. One of the 9.6s, the 9.4, the 9.2 had grader's notes. All 3 of those books had pressable defects listed as the reasons that they didn't get a higher grade. So the 9.6, it said it had a indentation on the front cover. The 9.4 said that it had very light cover creasing, and not color breaking creases, but very light bends to the front cover, and something else like very light indentations, in addition to very light foxing. So now that's a book I wouldn't expect to get a 9.8 because of the foxing, but 2 of the 3 defects are ones that are supposed to be taken care of with pressing. And then the 9.2 is the same way. It had 3 things listed: light bends to cover, light creasing to cover, and light spine ticks, basically. And again, with the spine ticks, I guess I wouldn't expect it to be a 9.8, but both of those other 2 things are things that should be taken care of by pressing. So I was really confused. I was like, why didn't the pressing get rid of these pressable defects? And then the next day, I got an invoice from CCS for $90, and I was like, that's a little bit odd. Apparently they bill you separately from CGC. Okay. Didn't have time to look into it, and then I got a phone call from CCS, and here's where I discovered their massive screw-up. CCS called me and left me a nice, polite message, very nice lady, telling me that they had my 6 books at CGC, but before they could be pressed, I had to pay the $90, and because the credit card they have on file wasn't working, they were calling me to get it straightened out so I could make sure I get my books as fast as possible. Now you see the problem here. I've already gotten my books. I sent in those books at the end of December last year, and they were received at the beginning of January. So when I go into my CGC page all year, all it said is January 6th, 2022, status received. And it was just like that all the way to the beginning of October. Basically meaning, yes, they acknowledge that the package is there, right? The beginning of October, I got a new thing where that was gone. And I got another thing saying they had been received. Now, in this case, what they actually mean is they opened the package, right? So after the package was sitting there for 10 months, they opened the package. And what they were supposed to do at that point was send those books to CCS to get pressed, right? But they didn't. They sent them to, whoever opened them, sent them to CGC graders. And they graded them and they sent them back without ever pressing them. So I had to call the customer service and tell them, you don't actually have 6 in my books at CCS because I have them here in my office. And I've already done YouTube videos about them. Like, they're gone. Like, they're here. So I'm not going to pay the $90, of course, because you didn't actually press them. So that was the other thing. I was basically like, I can tell from the grader's notes that you never pressed them. Plus, if you were going to press them, turns out you would have to call me to have me pay for them before they get pressed. So there's another thing where I know that they were never pressed because I never paid the $90 to get them pressed. So, upshot of all of this, still pleased with the grades that I got, especially considering none of them had been pressed. But I'm frustrated because with the 9.6, where the only grader's notes is an indentation on the front cover, that's something that I would expect, given that set of that parameters, that would be a 9.8 if it was pressed. I would also expect both the 9.4 and the 9.2 to get a grade bump, at least one grade by getting pressed, possibly more. The foxing you can't do anything about. The spine ticks either, but the spine ticks I think are actually less of a problem because I have seen 9.8s with a couple very small spine ticks. So we're looking at the 9.4, I think should have been a 9.6, potentially. The 9.2 should have been either 9.4 or a 9.6 if any of those books have been graded. And it does make a big difference. So again, it was $90 that I did not pay to get those pressed. Currently, a 9.8 of this book is selling for about $280, give or take. $280, some as high as $310 on eBay, but let's just call it $280. A 9.6 is only selling for $120, right? So there's a massive difference between 9.6 and 9.8 with this book. So you can just see right there, if the 9.6 that I got had been pressed and had come back in 9.8, that book would have been worth $160 more, just that one. The other two, if they're not a 9.8, the amount's not that much, but there's a huge, like the 9.4, those are only going for like $60. And so if that gets bumped up to 9.6, that doubles the value. So basically we're looking at, I should have spent $90 on the pressing because that's what the instructions were. That's what I signed up for. And if I had, it would have increased the value of my whole batch of books by about $200, right? So I would have made over $100 by having the books pressed. But they didn't press them. And now I'm kind of like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Because I don't want to spend $28 more to have those 3 books shipped back to Florida, and then pay $45 more to get them have them cracked, get them pressed, and wait a whole nother year for all of this to happen, in addition to everything, hoping that they get a bump, right? It's all supposed to happen at once. So basically, I'm just going to keep them as is. So at some point, I'll probably trade the 9.6 as part of the trading challenge. If someone wants to then do it, take the gamble themselves on having it resubmitted and pressed and then regraded to try and get the bump to 9.8. I mean, I'm not sure it's worth the hassle right now, but last year these books, instead of selling for $280, were going for $450. So if you're looking at a difference of $200 or $300 down the road, then maybe it's worth it to someone, but it's just too big of a hassle. So that's the story. I thought CGC had done a fine job. It turns out that they just completely bonked it. After sitting there for 10 months, they forgot to get them pressed, and then they tried to bill me for the pressing that they never did. After I've already received the books at home. So that part of my experiment, I still don't know whether the pressing that they do is good or whether it would help or not. But I do know that they did in fact screw it up. So there it is. There's the latest update. Now, as far as I know, everything's been taken care of with CCS, and they're not going to bother me for this $90 again. But it's possible that the lady did tell me she might have to call me back depending on what she finds out from the people down there. I'm not paying the $90 because the books were never pressed. So I hope I don't get into a big hassle back and forth with CGC over this, because that would just sort of be the icing on the cake. If I do, of course, I'll have another update video to keep you all in touch. But this all goes back to my original thing. Yes, I ended up making some money, a fair amount of value on these books because I sent them to CGC. Was it worth a year's hassle and all of this? TBD, I guess. But thanks very much for watching. See you next time.